Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. And this is a missing person segment. And we've got some good ones for you. Are really mind benders. So, first of all, if you watched our last news segment, which we posted just 2 days ago, you would have seen some of the most beautiful parts of Montana along the South Fork of the Flathead. I went out there and filmed. And it's still up. You can watch it. And what I'd like to do is expand this audience on the news. I don't get the reluctance to understand the factual side of what is happening in our world. And what is on the verge of happening. You need to know this. So, I'm not going to hammer it too much, but I wish you'd watch it because it's a beautiful place and I talk about some important stuff. But enough of that. Missing people. A lot of things have been happening lately about the missing. And a lot of you have been sending in things. A lot of these missing people that I talk about, I would never hear about them if it wasn't for you. And one of the cases I'm talking about today, which is a landmark case, one of the more important cases I've talked about in the last several years, is because you send it in to me. You see, when somebody goes missing, it doesn't make national news 99.9% of the time. It has to be really something tantamount to get it. It just doesn't happen. So when you see that it matches that 411 profile and you send it in to me, folks, I'm paying attention. And we're going to talk about one that is a 10x 411 case. And it's because you people have been paying attention and you're kind enough to send the stuff into me. And this one person actually sent me the newspaper that explained what happened. And I'm going to show that to you a little bit later. Why is the newspaper important? Well, I could show you a newspaper, but I can't take pictures from an online article and show it to you because that's copyrighted. But you see, the newspaper, I bought it, or somebody bought it and gave it to me, so I could show you that. And we can talk about it. And I actually talked to the reporter on this article about it, just to make sure I was 100% accurate of what I'm telling you. So, when I was out the other day filming the news article, it was a glorious day up here. It was 80 degrees, no wind, phenomenally gorgeous. Today, 82 degrees, and we have 25-mile-an-hour winds. And if I went out and filmed, I'd get so many people yelling at me, oh, it just hurts my ears to listen, and, you know, why can't you do something, get a dampener for the sound? I have all that, okay? This is my first rodeo. I know about sound. So, that's why I haven't been out so much lately in the outdoors, because too many people complain. So, we're going to get started with some of the letters that came in, and there's some good ones. Hey Dave, hope you find my story interesting. I currently hold a federal position, and I know that along with medical exams and PF exams, there are also psych exams. I'm former military, a disabled vet, and close to federal retirement, so I would love to keep my job. So just to let you know a little bit about me, I was born and raised in a little town about 30 miles north of Abilene, Texas, where Dyess, D-Y-E-S-S Air Force Base is. This is important for later. When I was months old, I became very sick. My mom said there was something wrong with my blood. but she did not like to speak about it. When I was about 5, I woke up from a nap to find I could only describe it as a glowing being. I do not remember features at all. I remember screaming, and when my parents came in, I told them what I saw. They told me it was just my guardian angel. Let me stop there for a sec. I get a lot of people writing to me. Federal agents, park rangers, police officers, firefighters, federal employees. I never give up a source. They could stake me to the side of a house. I would never give it up. It's something ingrained in me. I will never give anybody up. Somebody says they don't want me to talk about them. It won't ever happen. Guaranteed. So, if you have something to say about something I do, and you want to tell me about some internal workings in an agency, I'm all ears. Back to the letter. Years later, I am at my mom's house out in the country, just taking a walk outside with my youngest, who was about 15 at the time. At some point, we both looked up and we see this triangle-shaped thing flying over the house. It moved slow, too slow for something that big. There was not a sound, no wind, and if it had been a helicopter, we would have felt it. I would say it was maybe 50 feet above the house. The weirdest part is that I do not remember anything else past that point. I honestly thought it was a weird dream that I just could not forget until one day my youngest came to visit me, and as we were sitting outside watching the stars, we had just watched one of your movies, and he asked, quote, "Do you remember the triangle?" I burst into tears. I thought I was losing my mind, because I am remembering other things. He also has no memory of going back into my mom's house, much less returning to our house. Pretty weird. The triangle we saw is not like the one a lot of people say they see with a small lights and one big one in the center. That one, Missing 411, the UFO Connection, my movie. You can watch it on YouTube, Vimeo, and Amazon. Buy the Blu Ray or the DVD from me at our website, NA, like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. Don't go to the online store. The one I saw and the one he described to me had small lights at each point. My son and I are connected in a way that we know when the other is in need, and as crazy as it sounds, we get a feeling when something is going to happen if we are together, and we feel and sometimes write about it. I've seen what I thought were starts that seem to flicker and then fade out. I've never been afraid, only curious. I think that is why I like living in the country. In fact, I just bought a house way out in the country in Georgia. I keep thinking I'm going to find a hypnotist that will help me remember, but I'm afraid I'll end up in a psych ward and unemployed. Anyway, I love your movies. I'd love to hear what your opinion is. And am I crazy? I've got my brother hooked on your stories. Well, thank you. Crazy? I don't know, maybe you are. I don't know. I've heard so many stories of people who have seen things. And until I sit down with them and spend a couple hours, I really can't make a judgment about somebody. And I can't say how I make the judgment, but it's after years of going to classes and training and life experience that you just kind of come to that point where you put it all together and you make a judgment. And it has to do with their mannerisms, the way they talk, the way they act, the way they move. There's a lot of things that come into it. But it's very precise. And truthfully, I only know of one time in my entire missing person research that I ever met anyone who was really crazy, and that was I flew to Las Vegas once to meet somebody who made some pretty serious claims. And I had an affidavit all filled out for her to sign. And it was only after we got to the UPS store that she started to break down. Namely, she lied to me about her name. I found that out when she presented her ID to sign the affidavit. Only you can't sign an affidavit if your name's incorrect on it. So she lied about that. And then I said, hold on a sec. Let's leave here. So we go back out to the car. I started questioning her again, and I said, and all of a sudden things start to break down. And once you usually catch somebody in a big lie, and a name is a big lie, their defenses start to fall. And you could start to see through who they really are. Now, was I mad that I flew to Las Vegas for this idiot? Yeah, I was pretty mad. But I don't lose my cool on things like that, because I don't want them to think that they got to me. I'm just methodical, calm. You know, told her I think I deserve the truth. I came down here because of you, and I trusted you, so let's start to build that trust again with honesty. And eventually, the story started to change. And I've seen her online many times, and she's a blatant liar. And at times, people have asked me about her. And I don't like to talk bad about people unless I think the person is trying to use somebody else. Then I'll tell the truth. But that was one of the biggest ones. Next story. Hey Dave, I want to tell you that I love your vision and I'm absorbing as much as possible. Let me start with a little background. I am by nature a curious person. I've had more than one Bigfoot experience due to living in some pretty remote areas in northern British Columbia over the years. The paranormal-like event that happened near Smithers, BC, where I was helping a friend with some work, and I had noticed a boom sound from the east. 2 hours later, it happened again. It was unsettling to say the least because we don't have military or airplane activity in that area. Later, I had learned that this was a phenomenon being experienced everywhere. The other paranormal event I experienced was a really loud horn or bugle, maybe a trumpet. My friend and I were in Terrace, BC at the time. I was hoping that these events would strike your curiosity enough, and you would possibly inquire more about this phenomenon. On previous programs on YouTube, you mentioned that your movies are available on Amazon in your store. I wanted to inform you that YouTube free-to-watch movies also offers Missing 411 The Hunted, and Tubi offers Missing 411 and Missing 411 The Hunted. Thanks for everything you do. And that is correct. They do. Tubi's a partner with our distribution, and you can watch those. So, I've heard about the sonic booms. Haven't heard about the horn sound. That'd be a new one to me. If anybody has heard about sonic booms in areas where there shouldn't be any, I'm interested. If you live around a military base, that's pretty normal to hear stuff like that, so I wouldn't be interested in hearing that. Several of you have written to me, and apparently if I don't acknowledge it, I just get hundreds of them, and it's happened. Austin, Texas, deaths of people in the lake. There's been a number of deaths in the lake in Austin. And I've been following it, and I'm actually waiting for the police to get their head out of their kazungas and start acting like real investigators, because they're not letting a lot of information out. But for the information I've seen, it matches all the cases I've written about in Missing 411, a sobering coincidence, where it's men go out, disappear, and are found in a body of water. Most often they're drinking and they disappear and are found in a body of water. Now, I've researched hundreds of these cases. Not one of these men has ever been seen going in the body of water. How can that be, Dave? I wish I knew. Many of these cases, the people were in a town where there's a river or a lake nearby, and that's where they end up. Many of those instances, it's in the middle of winter and it's 20 degrees out, and the person ends up in a river 10 miles upstream. How does that happen? There's no tracks in the snow. There's nothing to indicate that they walked across that area and purposely went in the water. Yeah. These have happened in Boston, New York, Chicago, Wisconsin. And they're almost cookie cutter type cases, just the way I explained. And they occur in all seasons, not just in any one season. And it's an international issue. I've written about cases in 16 countries that all match this profile. Now, the latest one is in Austin. On the international side, in Manchester, the UK, they had somebody they called the Pusher, who supposedly was pushing people into the canalways. Okay, nobody ever saw anybody get pushed, but that's what they called it. And then people start saying, well, there's a serial killer there. Well, it's probably a serial killer, true, but not in the conventional sense. Now, many times, when the body's recovered, they can't determine a cause of death. So it's quite an interesting set of circumstances. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, that when you put a body in water, it deteriorates at a different rate. Different things happen to the body. And it gets bacteria and things on the body that it would normally not have. Interesting. It was an interesting angle when I started looking at it. It's still strange and I don't understand it. But it is what it is. There was a team of guys and they were looking at the issue from a very confined space in New York. There was a New York homicide investigator. A New York missing persons investigator that started to realize that missing people were ending up in places they should have never ended up. And he teamed up with a couple other people and they coined this phrase, the smiley face killers. They claimed that smiley faces were found in areas where these bodies were located. And again, they were thinking of it from a very confined location. Well, they were looking at it from 100 feet above the ground. I looked at it from 30,000 feet. And all of a sudden I found these cases all over the world that match this specific profile that matches the profile of the other missing people. Just the location where the body's dumped is different. And if you watch this movie, I explained to you that bodies are dropped. Now, if they're dropped in water, they're not going to show any injuries like they would if they were dropped on land. Think about that. Okay, next story. I have a UFO story for you, Dave. My husband tells me that in the late 60s, he was with his first wife and 2 young children in the Cross County Shopping Center in Yonkers, New York, when they saw a group of people looking up. When they looked up, they saw a UFO. It was stationary, close enough to see detail of shape, light, and color. It was a classic saucer shape. In the late afternoon sun, it did not reflect the sunlight. It seemed to glow with a greenish light. It appeared to have windows around the upper part that had a yellowish glow. They all watched it silently for at least 15 to 20 minutes as a group of maybe 50 shoppers gathered around them and watched it too. It did not move and it was silent. He finally felt he had to take his wife and children home to dinner, so they moved on. He told me this story about 40 years ago and has brought it up many times to assert his belief in UFOs. His older adult daughter, who was about 8 years old at the time, has also verified the sighting in conversation with me on 2 occasions. I had him do a drawing for me today, and he said it was one, if not the most memorable event of his life. There's the drawing. Pretty good, I think. Pretty darn good. Thanks for forwarding it and doing it. Couple things. Yellow light glowing from the window. Never heard that. So it was about 500 to 700 feet away, about 75 to 100 feet wide, a greenish glow coming from underneath, a dull finish, unlike shiny metal, and about 40 to 50 feet high. So 100 foot in diameter, 40 to 50 feet in thickness. Pretty darn interesting. Now, this happened in the 60s. Now, if it happened today, it would be entirely different, which may be why it's not happening today. Because what does everyone have today that they didn't have in the 60s? You know, cell phone, smartphone, camera, video capabilities. So is that why it sat pretty carefully above Yonkers, New York? And what was it doing there? I don't know. But I think it's unusual that the UFO had what appeared to be windows. That is not an uncommon report, but it's less common than a UFO with no windows. And if you think about it, a UFO with windows, if the technology was so advanced, you'd think that they probably wouldn't even need windows. And if it had windows, what are they looking at that they could be so close to where it is really meaningful? I don't understand that part. Next one. Hey Dave, I'm a recent listener to several of your shows on YouTube and would first like to say that I found them to have a lot of great information. I don't want to take up much of your time. Thank you. So I'll try to make it brief. I'm a lifelong resident of the Uinta Basin in Utah. I've always spent a lot of time outdoors due to recreation, and also my job as a wildland firefighter. I spent a lot of time looking in the night sky and think I have a pretty good idea of what is normally visible. Easter night, I was sitting out back of the house having a cigarette when I saw what was initially thought to be a meteorite. It streaked in from the south and was a little dimmer than the surrounding stars. It was predominantly white but had a slightly green tint. After initially streaking in, it started moving very quickly northward, then abruptly stopped, changed direction, and flew in an arch and then north again until out of my view. The entire time across the sky was approximately 4 seconds. While not the only thing that I've seen in the area, I haven't seen anything else for a couple of years. Would there be any point in reporting this? If so, to whom would you suggest? Thank you for your info. I would report it to the National UFO Reporting Center and Peter Davenport. Peter's a good friend. He has a great database, National UFO Reporting Center. I don't think it's worthy of a MUFON report and investigation, but that's where I'd start. Let me think what else I wanted to tell you. My friends, Joe and Tammy Hauser, that own the Montana Vortex, they usually are gone for part of the time in the winter, and they just got back. I just went and saw them the other day. And they're planning to open the Vortex sometime around May 15th or May 20th. So if you're coming to Montana and you're thinking about visiting, totally worth it. I actually have a great affinity for that vortex. There's something about it that has me lifelong intrigued. Next letter. Hey Dave, I was watching your show with the missing Air Force crew and the B-52. In one of the missing persons segments last week, I talked about a B-52 who disappeared off the coast of Texas. And in conjunction, in the same time frame, a woman disappeared, essentially almost in the same spot the B-52 disappeared. It's worthy of watching. My dad was a pilot in the Army Air Corps in World War II. He was a first lieutenant, flew 25 missions over Japan and the South Pacific. He talked a lot about fellow soldiers and the poker games they played. How they cooled their beer by running airplane fuel through a tube inserted in 50-gallon drum with water and their cans of beer. Something like that. And other adventures. He talked about getting through flight training school and guys that were good friends of his who crashed and were killed. He didn't talk about his missions, though I wish I could have learned more about them. I'm very proud of my dad. He was the best. I watch your show and I've watched all your movies several times. Recently I purchased some of your Missing 411 books. I really like them all. The show, the books, and the movies. Thank you for all your hard work and dedication to researching. I want to give you a saying. It reads, "Some things are true whether you believe in them or not." My dad and I were very close. He was the best. God bless you for loving your son Ben so much and holding him high. Sorry for your loss. I know you will see him again. I pray all the time that I will. Next letter. Hey Dave, I'm 65 now, but I've had many unusual experiences inside Yosemite Park, where my family frequently camped in the 60s when I was a kid, and where I spent a large portion of my teenage years camping, hiking, and exploring. I practically lived there every summer. Stop there for a sec. If you don't know, the number one cluster spot in the whole world with the most disappearances is Yosemite National Park. Do not go there alone without a personal locator beacon. That would be stupid. Now, what this person says in this next paragraph is just mind-blowing. 1975. I regularly enjoyed climbing the Mist Trail, Mist, M-I-S-T, and I stopped at the top to rest on a tree stump overlooking a boulder field. I saw 3 deer walking in the boulder field, and one of the boulders raised up and something underneath grabbed one of the deer by the leg and it was gone. It all happened so fast the deer didn't even make a noise. Now, I'm not saying there was a gigantic trap door spider under the boulder, but that's what it reminded me of. I am still freaked out by boulder fields to this day. You're the first person I've told this. Thank you. I appreciate that. Boulder fields have always been associated with missing people. One of the profile points. I really don't know what to make of the boulder field association, but this puts it in a whole new perspective. I've been thinking about that since I first read this letter. Onward, 1976. I stayed at the Merced High Camp when I could and regularly hiked up and down the valley floor getting luxuries for the workers at the high camp, so they tolerated me. One day on my way back from the valley floor, I was on the outskirts of Little Yosemite Valley where I slowed down to pace myself. There was very high grass, reeds, and a marshy area, and as I passed it, I heard a muffled noise to my left, and there on the trail I found a pair of baby booties on the edge of another trail that crisscrossed that trail I was on. As I was staring at them, I heard another muffled noise to my left, and there on the trail further down was a crumpled baby blanket. So I walked over to pick it up, and as I did, I looked up and saw another item, mid-air, being thrown from the marshy area, this time much further down that trail. I dropped the blanket and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the high camp. I felt like I was being lured. The weird thing is, the booties and blanket weren't even dirty. Now you may think, wow, a lot of weird things are happening to this person. And you may discount it because so many things are happening to that person. The reality of it is, certain people seem to be magnets for this kind of stuff. And I've spent too much time around these people to ever think that they're fabricating. At least the ones I've met. I can't confirm that what this person is saying is true or that they have credibility, but I am saying that it's not unusual. Now, Yosemite has had a lot of weird things over the years. They've had UFOs, they've had Bigfoot, and everything in between. I've read you stories about people finding strange things up valleys. I've heard about boulders opening, rocks opening, just like this lady said. This isn't the first time. But it's interesting to me that the National Park Service won't acknowledge anything I just spoke to you about. They don't want to talk about it. Even though that is our government, they won't talk to us about what you have reported to them. They won't even tell us the history behind some of these unique things that happen in that park. Next letter. Hey Dave, I hope this finds everyone in the Paulides camp happy and healthy. I'm watching class 1 of the UFO, UAP, USO, and I got to thinking about how wonderful you are. Aww. I watched every class in Bigfoot 101, read several books you suggested, including The Quantum Bigfoot by Ron Moorhead. And now we're on to the next great thing. I learned so much in the Bigfoot 101 class, enough that I think I can speak intelligently on the subject to those who care to listen. In my humble opinion, I got a college-level course for free, and I'm very thankful. I realized the tremendous amount of work and research that went into developing the syllabus, then each class, then putting this on YouTube each week. Man, that's a heck of a lot of work. Thank you. Dave, you're a gifted speaker. Every word just flows so naturally. It's as if we're sitting in my living room enjoying libations and having a conversation. You really reach out inside and grab my mind. You open my mind without brainwashing or berating me, and by the end of the course, I'm an enthusiastic believer, and it's free. Hallelujah. Now for the next class. You're probably the most sincere and dedicated creator on any platform. Just in case you had any doubts, this is the time I break into the song, Allah Sir with Love. Thanks for taking me with lazy cynic to engaged thinker. All the best to you, Angie and Huck. Head pats and belly rubs to Huck. Thank you very much. It's very nice of you. Now, for some of the people who don't know, let me grab one and I'll show you. This is important. So the Bigfoot class was 20 episodes long. Each class was about an hour. So that's like 20 hours it was a lot of work, I gotta say that. And at the end, I said, hey, there's a final. Take the final, mail it into me, and I listed all the criteria. And then you pass the class, and you get that. And I can tell you that hundreds of people have taken the final. And in general, people did pretty darn good on it. So I'm impressed. The finals on our Bigfoot website, nabigfootsearch.com. Don't try to take the final without watching some of the classes, because I guarantee you're going to fail. But all of the classes are easy viewing, nothing strenuous. I hope I come across the right way. And below the screen on the left-hand side, there's an area for comments, and you can read the comments. The number one pinned comment, a pinned comment means that's the number one comment, is I put down all the links to various things. And I link the first 5 or 6 Bigfoot classes. And then if you click on, at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, it says videos. If you click on videos, that'll take you to another screen where all of our videos are on it. And you can just search for the Bigfoot classes. It's clear by looking, you'll find them. And you can watch them. Many people have been talking about mutilated cows, wildlife, cows, horses, goats, sheep in the last month. There's been a series of mutilated cows found in Texas, and I am following it, and I am paying attention to it. There's an article about a year ago about Montana, and this will give you some insight on the topic. Pay attention. Unsolved mystery resurfaces in Montana. Who's killing cows? On the rolling prairie that rises up here to become well known as the Rocky Mountains a few miles away, Mark Taliaferro points toward the fields where the carcass of a cow was recently found. It's not a natural death, he said. A cattleman who has been ranching in north central Montana for 25 years. When you see it, I tell you, it makes a believer out of you that something weird is going on. 8 cow killings have been reported in Montana since June 12th. The most recent on August 31st, and they all appear similar to the ones that occurred in the 1970s. I should tell you that this is a 2021 article. For ranchers and law enforcement officials in this remote part of Montana, the last few weeks have dredged up those memories. For several years, the prairie country along the east front of the mountains was rocked by dozens of cattle deaths. We had a bunch of them, said Pete Howard of Choteau County Justice of the Peace, who was sheriff when the first mutilations hit their peak. I've lived in this county all my life and worked on ranches and seen plenty of dead animals, but never did I see an animal with its face mask removed like that. Brian Schweitzer, a cattle rancher near Whitefish, who was the unsuccessful Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate last year, recently found one of his cows killed in the same inexplicable way. The brand inspector said it was a lightning. Mr. Schweitzer said, but there was no lightning that night. And it very much looked like those incisions that were done with instruments. But I said, fine, there's a lot of things I can't explain. Schweitzer valued the loss of his grown steer at near $1,000. Now, as law enforcement officials and ranchers are split over whether the deaths merit investigation as anything more than a lightning strike or a wolf kill. Now, let me stop here for a second. Ranchers are not idiots. One thing ranchers know, they know what they're raising, and they know what predators are out there. They know what marks predators leave on the animals, and they know what a lightning strike will do to an animal. Lightning strikes are entirely different than what happens to an animal that's mutilated. In all the cases, part of the animal's face, called the mask, is removed along with reproductive organs. Usually there's no blood. Predators will often not touch the carcass. A key point. This publicity is awful, said Leland Cade, who was the editor of the Montana Farmer Stockman, a trade magazine in the 70s, and wrote 4 articles about the killings then. City people don't know what's going on, and they envision crazy people doing weird things to animals. Law enforcement officials in the 70s erred in thinking the deaths were mysterious, Mr. Cade said. Although the cause was never determined, the cattle, he said, were probably killed by predators. No. Who have been known to remove faces and organs. No. Now we have a brand new crop of ignorant people who don't know what goes on the range, he said. Lie. But Dan Campbell, who was raised in an area ranch and is now the Pondera County Sheriff's deputy, says people who dismiss the deaths are not looking hard enough. No vehicle tracks, no footprints, nothing has been around the animals. Cuts made to remove the tissue are very clean. These are smooth edges on those cuts, Mr. Campbell said. They are not bite marks. Part of the problem, investigators say, is that if someone accepts that these deaths are not run-of-the-mill, finding any way to explain them requires a long stretch of imagination. The mystery and savagery of the deaths have led to more fanciful speculation that the cattle, which can weigh nearly a ton, were killed by a band of satanic cultists. No. By UFOs or by secret military testing. Not cultists. No. No marks around the animals. No tracks. Nothing. To move a 1,000-pound steer takes a phenomenal resource. Keith Wolverton, a retired detective from Cascade County Sheriff's Office, investigated 67 mutilated cases as a director of a 5-county task force from 74 to 77. The mutilations are a real phenomenon, Mr. Wolverton said. He was a captain in Cascade County at the time. I don't think little green men have come from another planet to kill cows. Neither does he think that the killings back then were the work of a cult, an angle he and other investigators pursued for a while. Someone always talks, he says, adding that who did it and why is a question that still haunts him. There aren't easy answers to this, folks. One organization that takes the killings seriously is the National Institute of Discovery of Science, which is financed by Robert Bigelow, a real estate and aerospace mogul, and prior owner of Skinwalker Ranch. With a team of 6 investigators that include academic researchers and former law enforcement officials, the organization has studied cattle killings for 6 years. It receives 6 to 8 reports a year, primarily from western states, and investigates the deaths with forensic techniques and great discipline. Colin Kelleher, a biochemist who is a deputy administrator of the group, said the only thing research showed for sure was that someone is cutting up animals with sharp instruments, and chemical substances are sometimes added. One cow found dead in Utah had a hole in its head and a preservative, BHT, and formaldehyde in it. Who might be doing it? We don't know, and the last thing I would do is speculate, Mr. Kelleher said. The field is full of speculation. That's just a tidbit for you about really what's going on with mutilated cows. And I'm going to talk more about it as time goes on, because I think it's important. Now, I'm going to talk to you about the first case. First missing person case involves a lady, 86 years old, who lived on a farm in northern Michigan. Her name was Elizabeth Lidbeck. She went missing July 6, 1930, at about 5 p.m. in a farm in Felch, Michigan. And hold your taters for a second. This is important. This is northern Michigan, Lake Superior. This, Kinross Charter Township. This is where an airfield was, Kinross Airport. This is where an Air Force jet took off to investigate a UFO flying over Lake Superior. Disappeared, was never found. There are cluster zones of missing people here, here, here. There's going to be a new one right here because we've had so many disappearances in this area. This is the Gwynn State Forest area. This is the Crystal Falls State Forest area. And this is where Felch, Michigan was located. And this is where the lady disappeared. Folks, this area right here in northern Michigan ranks way up there as far as strangeness and missing people. Okay? Keep going here. Now, Mrs. Lidbeck lived with her son's family. It was a family farm. Everybody participated. She was described as really an active older lady. Did her chores, participated, wasn't somebody who sat inside and watched TV. She was always on the move. Well, everybody has their job on a farm, and people didn't see her for part of the day on June 6th. But everybody always knows to come to dinner at a specific time. Well, when everyone sat down for dinner at 5 p.m., they realized that nobody had seen her since 2 p.m. So they thought that, well, maybe she's out talking to a neighbor on the adjoining farm or something. After dinner, they started looking for her. Didn't find her. So they went to the neighbor, and they started to gather resources, and they started to search. And late that night, they called Rudolph Freeman, the sheriff in the county, and said that Elizabeth Lidbeck is missing. Not a normal occurrence on a farm in this part of Michigan for 1930. Well, the sheriff got a hold of neighbors, volunteer fire department, deputies, started a search. They first searched the farm and the barn. That's where I would have started. You always start with the room that belongs to the person. Look all over that room, under the bed. Then you check the house. Then you move outward from the house and you check the barn and the fields, and you make sure that the obvious is covered. Then they start moving out. Now, she was mobile, so 2 miles from her house would be a reasonable distance to look for somebody like this. But the problem is that the Lidbecks had said that she wouldn't leave the farm property. Maybe to the fence line, maybe to go see a neighbor, but that would be it. They found nothing. And the searches in this area went on and on for over 3 weeks. And what happened was that the sheriff got a hold of a mining inspector for the state of Michigan, a man named Dahlstrom. And within 5 miles, there were several gravel pits that had a large amount of water in them. So they said, well, we need to drain the pits and we need to search them to make sure she's not in them. So they did. Didn't find anything. Now, there were bloodhounds, but the closest ones in 1930 were in Iowa. And the sheriff thought that by the time that they had the dogs in this area of Michigan, that they would think that Elizabeth would be dead, so they didn't call for him. There was never talk that she had any type of dementia, but the family was crushed. Now, the family decided to keep going on their own. And they kept going looking for the body. They kept searching the local areas. And by the end of the summer, they had to give up. Now, can you imagine living on a family farm that had been in your family for generations, and somebody disappears on it, and you have to get up every day and look at the field and imagine, where is our grandmother? Every day you're on the same farm. Now, that area, a lot of people have disappeared in the woods around there. It's a very strange conundrum, to say the least. To say the very least. Now, that's really the lead story into what I'm going to talk to you about now. And I want you to really pay attention to what I'm saying, because this is a landmark case that I don't want you to forget. But it hits every one of the profile points that we talk about. And I want to thank the people that mailed in the articles on this incident. The man's name is Robert Hageman. 78 years old. He went missing January 30th, 1923, or 2023, this year at 8 p.m. He lived in a city called Beaver Creek, Ohio. He was a retiree, lived with his family, his son's family. He had early dementia, but he was functional, and he could drive, they said. His son came home about 8 o'clock, and he noticed that there was some fast food bags and a receipt showing that his dad had gone out that day and got some fast food. But his dad's car was missing. This had never happened before. That car was a 2005 Buick LeSabre that was silver in color. So the son called the sheriff. And this is the missing persons flyer that the sheriff's office put out. Mr. Hageman, 78, 5'11", 156 pounds, gray hair, blue eyes. There's the vehicle that he was driving. Okay? Son was really concerned. Well, the following day, at 11:44 a.m., his vehicle was found by sheriff's deputies. There was a all points bulletin put out for the car, so everyone was looking for it, and they found it at an entertainment complex about 10 miles from the house. And this facility is in an area surrounded by farm fields. Very odd place for this car to be parked in a parking place in the parking lot. It was called the Overdrive Venue on US Route 127. South of Montezuma, Ohio. And it was just south of the only lake in the entire area called Grand Lake. Pretty good sized lake. So that made me suspicious. Now, I want you to understand, I've been at this for now over 12 years. Committed my whole life to this topic of missing people. Many of the people that I investigate have serious medical issues. And it's nothing that you could look at them and say, oh, yeah, he has leprosy or something. No, it's nothing obvious that you could look at the person and see it. As in dementia, you could look at the person and they seem completely normal. I personally have lost count on the number of dementia victims that have disappeared and have never been found. And I say this because it's befuddling to me. If your thinking is impaired, if your common sense is impaired, how could you be thinking so clearly that you could disappear and never be found? That doesn't fit. This story is not about the ineptitude of a search and rescue. In fact, quite the contrary. As I present this story, pay close attention to the effort that's put forth by every police department and sheriff's department in this area of Ohio. It's impressive. So the same day that the vehicle's located, the Mercer County Sheriff is assisted and gets assistance from Salina Police Department, Montezuma Fire Department, Coldwater Fire Department, and local residents from the entire area in a 10-mile radius. The sheriff sets up on foot. They get ATVs, UTVs. Temperatures that night dipped down to below 20 degrees. They brought in canine units, and they actually used a private plane. Now, the open fields around the location where Robert disappeared were plowed and flat. Now, this is the actual newspaper that was sent to me by somebody who lives out there. I'm going to show you the picture of the field. See that? That's the field. Plowed, flat. Nothing's in it. Got it? Remember that. So they're flying over this whole area. A field like that, you could probably see effectively into the field. A mile? Half mile? I don't know. Long ways. So the following days after the initial day after search, on February 1st, the state of Ohio dedicated aviation resources to search. They sent a state highway patrol helicopter. And they went out to 4 square miles from the point where the car was found. They also contacted area hospitals, hotels, and businesses. And then they contacted an agency that I know quite well, EcuSearch. EcuSearch started out of Texas, and they've got satellite offices in various areas. They're an advanced search operations group that does an outstanding job. Once they get on a case, they usually find the body. Well, they searched. They found nothing. February 3rd, detectives from Beaver Creek and Mercer County got together. They went back to the entertainment center, and they decided that they were going to do another search. And they did another search. They found nothing. So they had search and rescue on land and from air. They had ground pounders on their feet and volunteers searching through gullies, streams, fields. Nothing. They brought in canines at the car. No scent to track. They had a private airplane, Ohio Highway Patrol helicopter with FLIR, and they put drones in the sky. Multiple days, multiple resources. Friends, this was a textbook search by Mercer County. In my humble opinion, they did everything right, and I kid you not. They searched essentially a 2-mile by 2-mile area, and they covered that extensively. And they were frustrated because they felt that they should have found Mr. Hageman. Now here's the part that will just kick you in the face. I have several cases like this over the years. This is the most recent one. Mr. Hageman was reported missing January 30th of this year at 8 p.m. by sun. On April 20th, 2023 at 7 a.m., 1,135 feet from his car. In the middle of that field I showed you, they find Mr. Hageman's body. Now, this is a picture, an aerial view of where the body was found. This is the actual field where the body was found. Yes, in the middle of the field. I contacted the reporter that wrote the story because I wanted to make 100% sure that those photos represented what the field looked like when his body was found. And the reporter, Leslie Gartrell, really nice lady, got back to me right away and said, David, it looked like that. And it really, really bothered law enforcement that they found the body under these circumstances. Now, there were no tire marks, things going up to that body like they dropped the body in the field. The sheriff said, I think it was hard for them to say it. The only thing they could think is that the body was there the entire time. But, sheriff stated, and I quote, "We're frustrated. I'm frustrated that we didn't find him sooner." And then he said, "I can't explain it how we missed it." And he said there's no indication of foul play. And I asked the reporter to go back and contact the coroner and get the date of death. And the coroner can do this. Because if Mr. Hageman died a week before he was found, then where was he for 2.5 months? If he died soon after he disappeared in January, then his body should show significant decomposure by being in that field. But if you're going to try to convince me that all those resources missed Mr. Hageman in that open field, that dog don't hunt. So here's the map that I made of the incident. So this is Grand Lake. This is Montezuma, Ohio. The vehicle was found here at the Overdrive Entertainment Center. The body is found just down the road in front of the entertainment center, 1,135 feet in the field. So this is the map, just a different view of what I showed you. The aerial view of the field, plowed, a closer view of the farm field. Now, his body was found by a farmer going out at 7 o'clock in the morning on April 20th of this year and finding the body there. Can you imagine the look on the farmer's face when he had searched that field? The sheriff said everyone had searched that field. And then he suddenly finds the body there? Well, I can tell you folks that I'm in pretty good shape. But Mr. Hageman was 5'11" and 156 pounds. I don't care who you are as a man. Dead body weight, you can carry it a short distance, but you aren't carrying it 1,000 feet into the middle of a field. Now let's think about that. It's a wide open field. Wide open! A major highway's right there. If you were carrying a body on your shoulder, everybody would see that driving on the highway. So that's ludicrous. Remember my movie, Missing 411, The UFO Connection. Then go back and watch Missing 411, The Hunted. I did a segment there about Lima, Ohio. And watch that segment. I interviewed somebody in a band at the high school there and what they saw in the sky. And then what happened on an adjacent farm and what they saw. Yeah, go watch that. Something very peculiar happened to Robert. I'm very interested in what the coroner says he died from. Very interested in the date of death. And I'm also interested in what he was wearing when he was found. But do I believe that body was there the entire time? No, I don't. I don't believe that 1%. And I want to tell the sheriff and all the people that did the search, you did good work. Don't hold yourself accountable for missing that body, because I don't think it was there. And I say that after reading about 2 to 3 dozen cases just like this, where people were found in fields that had been searched, and then suddenly they are there. I'm very sorry for Robert's family that they lost their dad. I appreciate you being here. Please share this video. This is an important one, folks. This is an important one. All of the pieces to the puzzle come together here. All of them. In the meantime, be nice to people in your community. If you see somebody in distress, help them. And always, as I say, do something nice for somebody today. When you're out shopping, doing something. Doesn't hurt you. Smile, be friendly. Thanks for supporting us. And I'll see you soon. Paulides out.